should be treating this in the way storytellers could use it.
And that's the exciting thing about this industry, is that nobody's really done it yet, especially in AR. I mean, VR has been, it's pretty obvious that gaming is going to be a monster experience, but AR hasn't happened yet. But I think you're probably right. To some extent, it's going to be the storytellers that in the end know how to engage people and do that. Go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, let me just go back to 3D for a second. 3D was around before December 2009, but it took an avatar moment for 3D to really take off. That's what really started the industry, and that's what built my company and everything else. I think it's going to take an avatar moment for VR as well.
Anybody else want to say anything about story?
I'll go. I think it's somewhat related to the holiday theme. So if you guys haven't seen this, you should search on YouTube for Samsung, I guess Samsung birth, which is going to sound a bit strange. But there is a advert that went across Australia about a fly-in fly-out worker whose wife gave birth to her third child in Perth while he was on a mine site in Queensland, and he actually experienced it through virtual reality. So on the site they set up a room, pictures of like his other kids. He wore a headset, he could communicate with his wife, he was there for the whole experience. It kind of sucks like that he couldn't actually be there, but I think the social element of all of this stuff is probably going to be the most powerful. So videos like that, it's hard not to almost cry. It was a guy at the end because it's so powerful. Like in a technology that, I mean, if you look at people on the plane all wearing VR goggles, everyone looks separated. But something like this is bringing people closer together in ways that couldn't happen before. So,
two final questions. You and you, please.
I'm not sure what my full question is, but I
Okay,
feel like
next.
there's a lot of the technology is the technology, and it's a great tool for storytelling. But it seems like there's a gap between where the technology is right now and the ability of the storytellers who already exist, maybe in this room and also in LA, but the way that they're being trained to visually not only convey their story, but also convey their story in a way that's digestible by people who are trained to take in information in a different way than the traditional 3-act narrative on the screen. So how do you guys see that gap closing, or do you see that gap closing?
So how do you reconcile a neurology used to 3-act play with an immersive story environment of some sort?
Well, we're all trained to watch things a certain way. We can all sit in front of a TV and watch the 3 acts happen, or a movie or whatever. But in terms of the lead time for a creator to be able to imagine and visualize and have a hold of the technology, and then actually use it in a way that tells a story or something that somebody even wants to watch outside of the educational purpose.
So grammars, authoring tools, is that where we're going here?
I'm just curious, like, how is anybody being trained to do this?
No, I mean, what you're really talking about is having a sophisticated VR viewer base,
Yeah.
which does not
Yeah.
exist. Yeah, I mean, even the people that I know, I've explained everything to them, still won't look over here, right? When they're being prompted even by a very strong audio cue or a visual cue that's taking them in that position. So we do have a retraining, a mass retraining that needs to happen. The only way that can happen is by sophisticated systems getting out there and for lots and lots of people to see them. And I got to put in the youth, right? The youth is going to pick this up and they're going to get it right away. And they do.
I feel like all that's going to come through a process of learning. We had the same experience with people in the VR headset. First thing we shows a project called Evolution Reversed. We start off on a lake, completely empty all around, and we say, turn around and keep your eye out for the train. We sometimes physically have to turn the person, turn and look around. But once they identify the train and then it hits them and explodes with birds all around them, from that point on, and showing them other demos, they're looking around actively. There's this whole process of education that has to happen from the adoption of technology side through all the language of storytelling that we're still figuring out. But I mean, if you showed a caveman a modern day action film, I'm not sure it would make sense. We know, like, cut, zoom, that years of montage needs this, and it's a whole training process. We have 100 years of cinema, we have to do that.
One of the beautiful things about VR is that it allows everyone to be one. Still, I'm going to filter this one by religion. Go ahead, Christian.
Sorry for
That's Christian, by the way.
sorry for skipping. This is a question that has not been asked at the entire conference. What's the best acting you've seen in VR?
That's
with
a good
what
question.
you-
That's
Not a lot of it.
That's like a really important and overlooked question.
That's what's missing.
Yeah, one thing that we've been noticing is, it's not, theater acting is actually a bit better, but it's also not theater acting. Like and I think there's actually going to evolve to be different verticals within virtual reality entertainment where you establish the expected sense of communication and presence. It comes back to what I was talking about before about what's your role as a viewer in it. Because if you're in an intimate scene and there's a couple in bed, you're like, what am I doing here? You automatically feel like, I shouldn't be here. I think part of that has to do with the training in the vernacular, and part of that has to do with the acting methodology itself. Like, if you're on set, you see people, acting for camera, it's about those cuts and those subtle movements, as opposed to theater actors who are used to occupying the space. And part of that as a director, you have to decide how close is this camera going to be to the actor, are we going to pick up on that subtlety, and how much is that kind of awkward overacting going to play into it? Am I going for hyper real? Is this a documentary? Or what is this thing? Well, all that's going to evolve. I think our approach has been really try to establish and be consistent throughout each production, and try to train the viewer as to what's expected. And then if you throw a curveball in that, that's an interesting technique.
I think that I had said the last question was over here. Somebody had their hand up. I think we go ahead.
So I was curious if anyone's actually integrated IoT into an AR experience and like what it
AR is IoT if it has a URL.
Yeah, well, specifically like if you actually had an object here or a T-shirt, whatever it is, some actually real world object. How did you actually bring that big visualization into your app, into your experience? Like what techniques do you use or what do you experiment with?
In other words, living objects with their own powers in the story space. Anybody is heard of that?
I have a friend who's been out in that space, but I'm not supposed to talk about it.
That's because it's coming to
Maybe just generic then, like you said, you do like AR data visualization. Like what techniques did you use or would you recommend?
I mean, right now we're looking at a lot of the devices and figuring out. I mean, I think that's inevitably coming, and we're even talking about other modifications to the input devices to add hyperrealism. It's like making them objects that exist.
Make it really quick because I have one last question.
Yeah, David, you mentioned in your introduction the idea of using VR to affect attitude change.
Yeah.
It seems to me, without getting too clockwork orange about this, that the ability to have a user in this VR cocoon offers the possibility of creating cognitive dissonance, so that they have to resolve a difference between what you're making them feel and experience with previously held attitudes. Is there any literature in this now? Is somebody researching the field?
Yeah, there's actually, the literature related to this goes back to the birth of cinema. It was the Soviets who invented a new kind of cinema that would actually get the brain to respond to the data as if it were real. It was called montage. Prior to single camera long shot, people knew they were watching a movie, so they didn't have a relationship with the data, suspension disbelief. But the more that VR, and by the way, they brought the Soviet Union together out of 17 countries and 150 tribes by using the power to create a believable expression of culture using this new kind of cinema. The more that VR gets photorealistic, the more the experience to become replicative of life itself, the more that we can communicate good or bad behavior change. And really will come down to our values as to where it goes. I don't know if that was helpful, but Sergei Eisenstein's a good place to start.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
My pleasure. I have one last question. 1992, 93, this new thing called VR. How does it feel to be sitting here 13 years later, 12 years later, sorry, 22 years later? What do you want to share of your own experience of sitting on this panel? Of course, you look exactly the same. But what would be your closing thoughts as to where we are now as the stage 2 really beckons?
This is the most ambitious group in the world. We're focused on empathy and sharing and social things in a medium where you can't often make eye contact or look over anyone's shoulder. It's a huge challenge, and we realized back then that we didn't realize that there would be not just glass, but glass holes.
Yeah.
And people who, that there would be, the social problems are even bigger than we anticipated back then when we were the only people who had it. Now we have to, and one of the reasons I'm doing things the way I'm doing is we have to climb up this path where mobile, fortunately, is the ladder that's taking us from where we are now to these worlds where people who just have a phone and people who have a whole headset might be able to play together in a new kind of democracy. So it's very exciting.
It's social. And therein is the hope for all of us and our future, and mostly our kids and grandkids, etc. Thank you very much.